You're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. It's more fun to believe. Third year bonus.
And it's a bonus for the third year. Hey everybody, welcome to another third year bonus. This is your buddy Ryan Singer. Happy New Year to you. I guess is this the first one of the new year? It might be. So the year is 2025. I hope you're doing well. I am back in beautiful Los Angeles, California, my home. It's good to be home. I got to tell you, it's like 70 degrees here today. And I'm not trying to brag because I know you're in a snowstorm. I know many people back in where I grew up, my hometown, they're in a snowstorm right now. A bunch of snow got dumped. And I got to tell you, I spent about over 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks in the Midwest, and it was cold. And I experienced that with you, and I have empathy for you because I grew up there. And so I know you're scraping windshields and side windows, and you're starting your car 15 minutes before you even have to be in it, just so it's not a freezer. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate that I'm going to walk outside as soon as I'm done with this. And I'll probably have maybe some hiking pants on and a t-shirt. And I'll get lost in the sun. And I'll have to put on sunblock. And I'm not saying that to be a jerk. I'm just saying I'll probably have to wear a hat too because I don't want to get sunburned today. There's some cloud. Hey, it's not all gravy out here. There are some clouds in the sky. So keep that in mind. I don't know what's going on, other than, we're here, we're back, we're doing it. I'm about halfway through an edit of my book, Shapeshifter. I might share some more of that. Or I might share some of that, I should say, not more of that, over on the Patreon page, patreon.com/Ryan Singer. Updates on that. I woke up and my voice is deeper today. I don't know what's going on. Probably because I was up super late, drinking coffee, writing and editing. But that's the life, you know what I mean? That's the life I've chosen on purpose. I want to talk about something that's a little on the nose, apparently, or maybe it's a little on the nose. I want to just start off, set the tone for this episode by referencing Trickster in the Paranormal, which is one of the all-time go-to books. We're going to get into, I finished the telepathy tapes. We'll get into some thoughts on that as well. I know a lot of people have been listening to that podcast, and I'm highly recommend. It has my highest recommendation. Spoiler, it has my highest recommendation. And it's a great gateway for people who are non-believers or not into the paranormal or psi phenomena. It's a great introduction into that world for those people if they've never heard of idealism or thought about consciousness in any way. So it's kind of you're with I believe it's Kai Dickens, the creator of the telepathy tapes, as she kind of discovers that we've been living under materialism, and then, there might be something else. So it's kind of this awakening podcast, I guess. So it holds your hand a little bit if you're super into the paranormal and all these things. Some of it's going to be a little hand holding for you. But if you're not into this stuff, it's just so for your skeptical friends and the non-believer friends, it's the perfect podcast for them probably, and it's still an amazing podcast even if you're deep into this stuff, like we are over here. But more about that later. So I want to talk about. We're just going to get into this. It's chapter 25. It's about paranoia. And, this is the 4-year anniversary of January 6th, the insurrection attempt to overthrow democracy in this country. And yet people voted for him to be president 4 years later. It's just unbelievable to me. That the same people who will send me, this just happened, send me like a Jesus meme, also voted for this guy. Anyway, that's the reality we live in. Nothing makes sense, right? Anyway, okay, so here we go. Because I do think paranoia is important here, because paranoia is what led to, along with other things, which led to the tragic events of January 6th. And I got to tell you, if those people get pardoned, I mean, it's just going to be bonkers. I'm not putting that out there that it's going to be bonkers. I'm not manifesting that, but you know how it is. Okay, so here we go. So let's get into this, because I think this played a big part. This plays a huge part, especially in the geopolitical landscape of this country lately, and also in the paranormal world. So I think it's very timely. Hansen writes, paranoia and the paranormal cluster together. Let me read that again because I had my timing off. Paranoia and the paranormal cluster together. Examples include fear of being watched by ESP, witchcraft accusations, ideas that occult societies control the world, and conspiracy theories of government cover-ups of UFOs. Paranoia has several definitions. Webster's dictionary gives two. One, a psychosis characterized by systematized delusions of persecution or grandeur, usage, I think, without hallucinations. Two, a tendency on the part of an individual or group toward excessive or irrational suspiciousness and distrustfulness of others. I will typically use the term in the second, more general sense. There are many degrees of paranoia, and conspiracy theories are collective versions of it. Paranoia's association with pathology gives it a strongly negative connotation, and many people think of it only in that way. Even when the more general definition is used, like the term delusion, it evokes ideas of mental illness. With all the unfavorable associations, proponents of the paranormal have little incentive to mention the topic. Yet paranoia needs to be studied because it helps explain fear of the paranormal and opposition to psychic research. Projection and self-awareness. The projection hypothesis describes many instances of paranoia. It suggests that one projects one's hostilities onto an outside entity. For instance, toddlers' nightmares of monsters can be interpreted as projections of his or her hostilities toward the parents. The monsters reflect the toddler's thoughts, and they serve a beneficial function. After the nightmare, the child recognizes, at least partly, that he or she needs the parents' protection, and if he killed them, he would be left vulnerable to the dangers of the world. The toddler learns his place in the social order, the need for cooperation, etc. This is a natural and necessary development. Projection has many implications for topics in this book, and it can be formulated more generally in terms of boundaries and binary oppositions. Toddlers' projections indicate a confusion between self and other, between dream and reality, and between internal and external. The development of self-awareness can provoke fear. Barbara Babcock noted the pattern in her seminal article on the trickster. In reviewing Paul Radin's work, she commented that, quote, Episode 3 also provides the first indication of self-awareness in the statement. Trickster got frightened. For, as Radin puts it, being frightened in Winnebago's symbolism is generally indicative of an awakening consciousness and sense of reality, indeed the beginning of a conscience. I mean, we can get into more, and, Hansen goes on to give examples. There's a couple interesting, at least to me, points here. He touches on, in this section, the difference between dream and reality and confusion resulting from not being able to differentiate, leading to paranoia, which is something that I think we've covered on this show before, because there is something about the powerful and the lucid dream state that creates, or vivid, maybe is the better word other than lucid, because lucid, you are in control. But when it comes to your memories, and I know people who have blurry lines when it comes to memories between vivid and even lucid dream states, and the real world? Am I remembering something that happened in the physical realm or in the dreamscape? And that can lead to confusion when one isn't able to differentiate between the two. And that confusion can, at times, lead to paranoia, wondering, what is real, and maybe projecting that ambiguity of reality onto other things and potentially even people. So that's just one of the things. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other things that this ties into and that I think are very timely. Patreon.com/Ryan Singer. $3 a month gets you no commercials ever. And you can be a $1 patron. You can be a free patron. You can be a $10 patron. You could be a $200 patron a month if you really wanted to. And listen, I ain't going to be mad at you. Did you want to be a $500 a month patron? You could do that too. Now, I'd have to come up with some kind of system where you would actually be rewarded for such a thing. I don't know. Maybe we'd probably have to, eventually you'd be my therapist. I would Zoom you, once a week, and you would be my therapist for. Why would someone pay to be someone's therapist? That's crazy. We're going to be right back after this short break. And we've returned to the program. I just want to touch a little bit more, just another quick excerpt from, we're talking about paranoia and the paranormal, and what is its role and what effect does it have, not only in the paranormal, but in, the paranormal is a micro of the larger world, the macro, and I think we see that, and we can see how that plays out. Hansen writes about, paranoia and association with Bigfoot. And he also says understanding paranoia, is very important and useful in understanding the paranormal. And it helps explain fear of psi research and other things as well. This is an interesting little segment here. Bigfoot can be partly understood in terms of projection and paranoia. Anthropologist Henry Sharp, in his book The Transformation of Bigfoot, written in 1988, tells of a small Chippewayan society in which tensions between two brothers threatened the group's existence. A hunt for Bigfoot brought them together in a common purpose, even though neither had a firm belief in the creature. The hostility within the group was projected outward onto a common enemy, and that strengthened the social bonds. Each brother realized that he needed the other as an ally. The fear of Bigfoot was therapeutic and adaptive. This instance, like others, shows that estrangement can beget fear and the recognition of danger. He goes on to say, in many primitive cultures, illness, death, and bad luck are sometimes ascribed to a witch who may have some unresolved problem with the victim. The cause of misfortune is attributed to an outside source, again illustrating the concept of projection. The witch may not even be aware of being a witch, but can be accused anyway. In our culture, such suspicions are seen as irrational and paranoid because it is believed that one cannot harm another by thoughts alone. A witch typically has an innate ability to cause harm and may do so unintentionally. The term sorcerer generally designates a person who deliberately uses magic practices for negative ends. Excuse me there. What's interesting is, you can tie that into, it's the whole Ronald Reagan quote, or I think it was Reagan or something like, we need a common enemy to unite the world. And it's just such basic stuff, right? And it's such, it seems like low level human behavior tactics that you'd like to think we can get beyond, or that we would have been able to get beyond at this point. Although our understanding of the passage of time, we seem to think that we should be so advanced when in fact maybe we are still quite young in our development. You hear this a lot. We're still so young in our development. I've even done jokes about it in the past. But then I wonder, well, is that true? What is the measuring stick? If we are indeed such unique creatures, then Why should we be measured against other timelines and other development schedules? So I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure we shouldn't be further along. In fact, I'm inclined to, in this moment, believe that we should be further along. I am, this is a fine line for me because, I don't believe that anger and upsettedness really truly fosters permanent change or growth moving forward. I believe it can be a spark for certain things, and I think that it could be useful for that. But it can't be the main fuel source. It can be a spark for the fuel source maybe, but it cannot be the fuel source. You will burn bright and fast, and it will explode eventually. And anger and upsettedness, things like that will not serve you long term as a fuel source. And, people want revenge. People want to prove other people wrong. Yeah, but those people don't end up being happy in the end, even when they prove people wrong, quote unquote, by becoming successful. They always feel empty or, I thought it would fulfill me, and it doesn't. And there's been enough A&E biographies, enough other, biographies written about people who just, blindly pursue success or to get to the top of something, and they end up being miserable and not fulfilled by it. And it's a tale as old as time. And it speaks to, you burn, you learn, right? That you have to burn your hand on the stovetop to actually learn the lesson that it's hot. I'm here to say that we don't need to burn to learn. Sometimes you can just hear a story about a burn and you can learn, right? And the materialistic world of, modern Western science, etc., wants to know how everything works and wants to see the machinations of everything to believe that it's real and that it's true. And this kind of gets into one of the topics that Telepathy Tapes has been hitting on, which we love over here, and that's idealism. Now, Kai Dickens hasn't mentioned idealism in the spoiler. She doesn't say the word idealism in the 10 episodes that consist of the first season of the Telepathy Tapes podcast. I'm not sure why, but it just doesn't. It doesn't come up as an opposing paradigm or worldview, because idealism has been around for quite some time. So I'm not sure why that's not referenced, but because it's a whole nother can of worms, potentially. Who knows? There's only so much time on, hour-long or shorter episodes. It's not a Joe Rogan podcast, so rest assured you can actually... I knocked out 2.5 episodes, 3 episodes, taking a 8-mile walk/hike yesterday. I was the crazy person in a public park crying by themselves as they walked, although it was a little bit chilly by the end of it, so people maybe thought that I was, just I had a runny nose. Who knows? But who knows about the nose? I was definitely the guy crying in public. It was, every once in a while I would just be like, ugh, I would just audibly gasp. It's a pretty incredible podcast. But the point is, what I was getting to eventually was that do we even need this shit anymore, right? I don't need the skeptical person to keep me grounded. So when I say that I don't think we're as far along as we should be, even though some people will be like, well, you look at there's that great, the calendar of the Earth's history or whatever, and we're in like the 11:59 and 30 seconds before midnight or something. That's how short of a time period we've actually been here. When in fact that's not true. That's not accurate at all. You're talking about physical. You're talking about the physical embodiment of the human form, when in fact we have been timelessly here in spirit and in consciousness. And so when you frame it by these physical standards and calendars, you don't see the whole picture. And we should be further along. and the skeptic and the desire and the need and just the obsession, the unhealthy obsession for, like, we must know how everything works down to the atoms, down to the smallest level. It's childish, actually, in fact, when you truly examine it. It is actually the opposite of intelligent. EQ is a big acronym that gets thrown out there, like letters, emotional intelligence, right? And IQ's been out there for a while. EQ is now very popular. So what is the synthesis of those two, right? IEQ, EIQ, EIQ, IEQ. It doesn't matter. Okay, so what is your intuition quotient? What's your lowercase IQ? The point is, what am I getting at? I don't fully know. But we want to know how everything works, and we need to be able to replicate it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or it's not real. If we don't know, if we can't explain something, then it's not real, which is so foolish. Because 99.9% of these people who rely on this as their personality or as one of the big things they say to be a skeptic and poo-poo the woo-woo wild ones out here that believe in the paranormal and the supernatural because of all the compelling stories told by people without seeing the evidence firsthand or experiencing it. Yet we still choose to believe these people. We get poo-pooed because of lack of being able to show the evidence, right? And meanwhile, 99.9% of these people, they don't know how, they could not explain how a car works or how a plane flies. They don't know they don't know all the steps and the things that go into making a pen and why ink works or where ink comes from or how paper is even there in front of them. They don't know. They couldn't explain with any, or at least it couldn't pass any scientific rigorous examination, an explanation for that. Yet they still use the paper, they still get in the car, they still jump on a plane. They don't know how any of it works. And so what I'm saying is the skeptical mind picks and chooses what must be held up to the scientific materialistic standard. And it's cherry picking. We cherry pick what must be explained to believe is real. Everyone believes in consciousness. Everyone that I know believes in consciousness. And there is no explanation for it, yet they believe it. So I mean, is this a good sign? Is this trending in the right direction? So, once you understand the different aspects of what consciousness actually is, maybe you can piggyback off that, not needing to fully understand, but also understanding that it is real. We don't, so basically what I'm saying is the scientific method has been hindering us in the evolution of, spirituality and actually understanding the true multidimensional nature of who we are as these creatures of energy and consciousness. It's been a hindrance. It's been an anchor. People say, oh, you need to be anchored. You need to keep, 1 foot on the ground. No, do you? Do you really? Why? Why must we keep a foot on the ground? That is the question I think that we ask moving forward. Why must there be a foot on the ground? Why must there be an anchor? Has any ship ever truly reached its full speed or potential out on the ocean of life when it's dragging an anchor? Or do we need to reel that anchor in and untether ourselves once and finally from the ocean's floor and hit those waves and see what adventure awaits us out on the open sea? And that sea is consciousness. And some people are already doing that. In fact, more and more people every day are reeling in their anchor. And they are sailing away. Not in a bad way, but in a great way. And they're experiencing and they are exploring. And they are not bound or a prisoner to a definition of a thing or an explanation of a phenomena. It is enough to simply experience it. It's enough to feel it. It is more than enough to bear witness to someone's story of such a thing, and to take that story and that shared experience, because it's now a shared experience with you. Even if you weren't there, it has been shared with you through the beautiful power of language and communication, even though it is quite a limited toolbox for the vast array of emotions and things that we feel. It's now a shared experience. And the more we share, the bigger it gets, and maybe the more firm the ground for people's footing, so they won't feel so wobbly and won't feel so precarious. It's much easier to walk a straight line on flat ground than it is a tightrope. So imagine the tightrope is just a handful of people ever sharing their paranormal stories. And the more and more people share, the wider that rope gets, until finally it becomes the earth itself, or a giant platform of which to walk. And I guess it's no coincidence that platform is also a word that could be used for a place to be sharing ideas or thoughts or art or conversations. We're going to take another short little break here. Appreciate you. Thank you for listening to the show. We're chugging along here. I think this is $7.99. I need to do a better job about milestones, I suppose. I think 800 is coming later this week. Episode 800. Ooh, doggy. We're going to be right back after this short break. And we're back. I hope you're back. I'm back. We're talking about, we started off kind of talking about paranoia and projection and the paranormal. And, it plays a part in the world, and it affects people's choices and actions, and, creates call to actions for people. And, tragically, 4 years ago, as the day I'm recording this anyway, a couple people, I think it was, there was an insurrection at the Capitol. I mean, people lost their minds, and paranoia, projection, conspiracy, fear controlled people's actions, and now we signed up for 4 more years of it somehow. It's the same old script being used over and over again, and we're falling for it. I want to share a hopeful story with you that kind of ties into what we're talking about here. We're talking about leaving the skeptics behind. And I don't mean people individually, but I'm talking about skepticism in general, our reliance on the scientific method and modern day science and materialism, which we've been talking about for a long time over here. And that, we don't need it anymore. We don't need to be validated by that. We don't need to be part of the club. We don't need to figure out ways to explain paranormal phenomena under the system or the rules and regulations that, dominate and rule a world that, quite frankly, don't include such things. So why would we? Why would we be trying to force, beautifully, oddly shaped pegs into square holes? There's no reason for that. And it's a fool's game. And in fact, it's a childish endeavor. And it seems to me immature spiritually and, intellectually to rely on the scientific method, even though we've been told, in fact, quite the opposite, that you're immature and you're foolish if you don't. But when it comes to things that we can't grasp with our physical hands, why would we try to use physical measurements? So why do we need to know how everything works? I mean, we're curious creatures. I get it. I'm the same way. But this is a story from The Enchanted Voyager, The Life of J.B. Rhine, an authorized biography by Dennis Bryan. Chapter 40. It's called The Fire Builder, 1953 to 1955. Rhine's warm, friendly, caring letters still had the power to attract people to work with him. Among them, an undergraduate at Syracuse University, Robert Vandecassel, who was thrilled in the early 1950s when the parapsychologist gave him an assignment. Vandecassel's task was to determine, this is such a cool thing, was to determine if a lost dog had found its way home after making a journey of thousands of miles. The owners, a Syracuse family, had lost the dog in Fort Lauderdale while vacationing in Florida. 9 months later, the SPCA in Syracuse picked up a dog covered in burrs, whose pads were almost worn away. When a local paper ran an item about him, several families turned up at the SPCA kennels, hoping he was their missing dog. He ignored them all until the Syracuse family that had lost their dog in Florida arrived. Then he leaped over a fence, greeted them ecstatically, and most significantly, bounded up onto their pickup truck to sit in the place where their dog had always traveled. He looked like an exhausted replica of their dog, but, quote, looked like was not good enough for Rhine. If the dog had traveled thousands of miles and found his way home, then it would be a spectacular example of psi trailing, as Rhine called such an apparent ESP ability of animals. He wanted to make sure that was the case. What would Rhine consider adequate proof? It had already been established that the lost and the found dog were the same breed, dimensions, and color, with photographs as evidence. That was only partial proof, said Rhine. He understood the dog lost in Florida had previously suffered a broken leg and assumed its vet would have an X-ray photograph of that break. If Vandecassel could get an X-ray of the same leg of the recently found dog, and it revealed an identical break in the same spot, that would be as close to proof as Rhine could expect. Vandecassel believed he was about to make a valuable contribution to the psi trailing mystery when the family let him see the dog and showed photographs of the one they had lost in Florida. The two dogs looked remarkably alike. Now all Vandecassel had to do was obtain an X-ray of the dog's leg, but to his great disappointment, the family refused to allow it, saying that they had been harassed by strange mail since the story of their dog had been published and balked at doing anything that might bring them renewed publicity. So once more, the vital clue to establish the fact of psi trailing evaded the researcher. Rhine, as disappointed as Vandecassel, applauded his efforts and encouraged him to pursue ESP experiments with a $300 grant and keep at it letters. Recently married, the young student used his wife as a subject. He asked her to guess hidden colors and hidden names, and she scored high, although he suspected his controls were inadequate. He submitted a report to the experiment to Rhine. It was Vandecassel's very first attempt at a scientific experiment. Rhine published it in the Journal of Parapsychology in 1953, and Vandecassel was hooked. Okay, so what we have here is, strangely, I mean, full disclosure, I kind of just grabbed this book and opened it. And I opened it up to Fire Builder and up to that story. And, you know, am I shoving a beautifully oddly shaped peg into a square hole here? I don't think so when I say the story about the dog is a beautiful, beautiful example of what we've been talking about here today. There is a desire to prove. There is a need to validate and confirm, which the materialistic world and parapsychology, which is born out from it, seeks to achieve. Is it the same dog? You bet your bottom dollar it's that same dog, right? If anybody has ever had a dog or has known a dog, dogs are dogs are dogs. You know what I mean? If a dog isn't part of your family, it doesn't just pretend to be a part of your family and do all the things that a previous dog did without being the dog. Dogs are dogs are dogs. and your dogs are your dogs are your dogs. That's kind of difficult to say, actually. The family didn't need confirmation. Rhine, J.B. Rhine, of course he wanted confirmation. One of the forefathers of parapsychology, of course, right? So, wanted to prove this to people. And I don't fault the parapsychologist at all here of wanting to show people, just in the same way that telepathy tapes are trying to show people that this stuff is real by incorporating it into a materialistic structure, when in fact it's not. It's not that, right? And we're trying to use what it isn't to prove what it is, which I understand where that desire comes from, even if I do find it utterly frustrating. And I guess you spend enough time in this stuff, and you read enough stories, you hear enough accounts where you're just over it. You're over it, and I struggle. Do I want to continue to try to bring people along? Walk them across that bridge from non-believer to believer, into the land of belief, or am I just over it at this point? And we don't need it. That doesn't have to be a condemnation of them. I don't know. It seems that it doesn't seem like I'm ready to give up on people. Well, I know that for a fact. I'm definitely not ready to give up on people. And I think the sharing of information is important. It's just you can only hear the same thing over and over and over again so many times before you're just like, okay, enough already. I'm tired of it. And what we have to remember is that not everybody has been into this stuff, and not everybody, loves it or has had an experience or is close to someone who's had a profound experience or an SPE, a spontaneous paranormal experience, and they need to have their hand held as they walk across this bridge into the land of belief. And, I guess it takes, it just reminds me of these people who have been doing something for decades and decades, and they still exhibit such great patience and grace when explaining concepts to people that are new. Specifically, I'm thinking of teachers, right? The great teachers of the world, whether it's math, geography, spirituality, whatever it is. And they show such great patience, especially when faced with, rebuttal, I suppose, might be the word we can use here, or resistance against it as even being a thing that should be taught or is real in general. Imagine if every math teacher in the world had to first prove that math was real before they could even talk about it or teach you components or aspects of it. Wouldn't that just be exhausting? Can you imagine that? So this is what kind of harkens back to what I'm talking about with the cherry picking stuff, right? Wouldn't it be exhausting to have to validate the legitimacy or the mere existence of anything before you are able to start discussing, the nuances of such a thing? Because you could spend an entire life dedicated to the research and the investigation of the subtlest nuance of paranormal phenomena, let alone the entire field itself. It's just wild to me. But yet we must carry on. We must carry on. Because none of us, I don't have the answers. And I don't know the best way. I'm still a babe in the woods over here. I don't know nothing about nothing over here, son. Wait, who's that? Oh, we got to take a commercial, so we'll be right back after this short break. But hey, we're back. I don't know who that was. Hey, it was me. I took us to break, and now I'm bringing us back, but you jumped on me. Welcome back to the program. Let's get into it. Okay, well, thank you there. I appreciate that, whoever you were. We don't have time to name you right now. We got enough new people jumping into the show. We got Smug Singer, we got Disclosure Cowboy, We got, who was it? Factual Vampire or something? I can't. Who was the vampire? Oh, gosh. Okay, so Bobby Break. Is that who you are? You're Bobby Break? I'm going to take you to break. You want to go to break right now? We're going to be... No, Bobby, we're not going to break. Oh, I thought we were going to break. You said Bobby Break, so I knew it was my turn. No, sorry, Bobby. I'll bring you in next time we have to go to a break. I think we might have one more this show, so I'll try to remember to bring... I appreciate that. I'm ready to go to break anytime you're ready to go to a break. Okay, thank you, Bobby Break. I'm going to call you BB. Okay, now I've already given you a nickname, even though you just got named initially. So, okay, so we're back. So, what were we talking about? Well, that's my job to understand what we were talking about. I'm just trying to get you back on track after the break. Okay, thank you, BB. I appreciate that. I think that story about that dog, the dog from the Syracuse family, who 1,000 miles, that dog found its way back home. Now, if you think about the remarkable nature of such a story, it kind of blows your mind. And the connection between human and canine, right? And the telepathic connection between animals and humans has been, studied for, J.B. Ryan studied it. I mean, it's been, in my opinion, it's been proven. And anyone who's ever had a close relationship with a cat or a dog or a bird or even a lizard or a hamster, rabbits, you know that there's a mind meld. There's a connection that happens. And you don't have to be convinced of such things by a scientific study. And the Syracuse family is a perfect example of that. They didn't need to have an X-ray to prove to the world that this thing was real, that their dog found its way home. They didn't need to prove it to the world because they already knew it. They were content. They were happy simply by having the thing that they loved most back in their life. Having that dog back in their life was what was important to them. It wasn't important to show the world that it was their dog. You don't care if it's your dog in the world's view, right? Because you already know it is. To sit there and say that people wouldn't know who their dog is crazy. That's what's crazy, right? It's not crazy to believe that it's their dog. It is absolute lunacy for someone on the outside to be like, well, they can't be sure it's their dog. Are you kidding me? You've never had a dog. Because if you've ever had a dog or a cat or a pet of any kind or a child, you know who they are. You don't know. You don't just be like, "Wow, they seem really similar," and this human child answers by the name Darius, just like my child did. Darius. Yes, Father. See, it must. I'm guessing it's probably Darius. That's the story of Darius Rucker, lead singer of Hootie and the Blowfish, by the way. But it's absolute lunacy to think that someone doesn't know who their dog is. That is, to me, that's mind-blowing that someone would be like, well, they can't prove it. It's like, you are bonkers. You are traversing Mount Bonkers. You are at the top of Mount Bonkers, planting your flag. Okay, so... But see, that is a perfect example of leaving the skeptical behind and truly enjoying and living your life. Being reunited with the dog is the most important thing. Having that loved thing back in your life. Proving to the world that it's legitimate is of absolutely zero consequence in that situation. And I applaud the family. Now, there's the curious nature of me that's like, oh man, I wish they would have just let him, X-ray the dog just to show how cool it is for the hardcore skeptic, right? Just to show them overlay those x-rays on top of one another and have them be exactly the same and be like, see, this dog came back 1,000 miles, telepathically connected. It understood how to get home. And you can't say, well, a dog can just smell. A dog can smell 1,000 miles away. I mean, I'm not going to say that a dog can't smell 1,000 miles away, okay? Because I don't know about dogs' nose range, the smell range of a dog, but come on. There's a mind connection there. There is something that modern science can't explain with its current tools and measurement sticks. And we just have to accept it. And we have to believe it, and we have to embrace it. And not only that, we have to admire it and be in awe of it and appreciate it. And we incorporate it into what we know to be real and true in this life. And with that comes a sprinkle, at the very least, of mystery. And embracing that mystery and the unknowingness, which leads to whimsy, in fact, and multiplies our enjoyment of the experience of life, knowing that it's magical, it is unknowable, and unknowable in a way that is not necessary to know. I don't need to know why certain milkshakes are more delicious to me than other milkshakes. And to be fair, with the rarest of exception, all milkshakes are enjoyable to me, but some are my favorite. And why is that? It's because of my taste buds, I suppose. But why? What is it about my taste buds that are different than someone else's taste buds? Why do they differentiate between flavors? It doesn't really make sense if you think about it. Why are some taste buds different than others? Why do certain flavors resonate? What is it about the thing that's being tasted that creates the or the And don't say poison. We understand that poison's supposed to be bad for you, right? But I'm not talking about that. But why? Why do we have different taste buds? Why do I taste differently than you do in many different ways? I taste different than you would. Whether someone was eating us or whether we are eating something, I'm sure we taste differently. So there's a magic there, right? And I just accept it. I accept it to be true. I understand that it's a thing that happens. I like things differently than you like things. And you like things differently than someone else likes things. And that's just part of it. Vanilla and strawberry are magic to me. Chocolate, not so much. More muggle. Chocolate's more muggle to me. But peanut butter, get in there. Peanut butter is like the guy trying to convince me, you should hang out with chocolate a little more. And I'm like, I don't really like chocolate. And peanut butter's like, come on, give chocolate a chance. Come on, I'll hang out with you. The three of us will get together. And we can, have a good time. And I'm like, I really just don't want to hang out with chocolate. And peanut butter's like, come on, you like me though, right? And I'm like, I love you, you know that. Well, then come on, if you love me and I love chocolate, you got to probably like chocolate a little bit. And I'm like, fine, I'll hang out with chocolate, but only if you're hanging out with us and if you're a big part of the hangout. And peanut butter's like, I'm going to be all over it, so don't worry about it. And next, I'm hanging out with peanut butter and chocolate. I'm like, you know what? I actually kind of like this. I kind of like hanging out with peanut butter and chocolate. I wouldn't go out of my way to hang out with chocolate one-on-one, but as long as peanut butter's there, chocolate's pretty cool. It turns out. But as long as peanut butter's there, there's something about peanut butter hanging out with chocolate that brings out the best parts of chocolate, right? And I'm like, yeah, wow, chocolate is actually pretty interesting to me. And maybe chocolate's making me think about things I wouldn't have thought about if I ever, stuck to my thing of like, I'm not hanging out with chocolate. I don't want to hang out with chocolate. Maybe chocolate read a book that I was like, oh shit, I never would have thought about reading that book, chocolate. Thank you. And peanut butter's like, see, I told you, chocolate's my guy. And so the three of us hang out a lot now. So now I hang out with peanut butter and chocolate all the time. Although that's not true. I made a New Year's resolution not to have sugar. So I'm not really hanging out with chocolate right now. And, and I don't hate chocolate. I just prefer to hang out with chocolate only if peanut butter is hanging out. You get it. We all have things like that. But there's a magic there, right? There's a magic in peanut butter. And I don't need to understand the scientific breakdown of my taste buds to know that I love chocolate if peanut butter is involved. And that I love peanut butter regardless, even if it's solo. I don't need to know what's different about my chromosomes or taste buds or genetics, et cetera, to believe that it's true, because I know it's true because I've experienced it. And that's the dog coming home and the family not needing the x-ray. They don't need to know why their taste buds like that dog. Okay, that turned into a thing I didn't think it was going to turn into. They're obviously, they're the taste buds of their heart and the taste buds of their mind find that dog to be delicious. In a non-eating it kind of way. Okay. I love Syracuse. I mean, when I was a kid, I thought I wanted to go to Syracuse University, but it was like $30,000 plus for out-of-state tuition. And that was back in the early 90s. I couldn't imagine what it is now. Anyway, never pay your college loans back. You're too big to fail. So am I. I'm never going to pay it. I'm never going to pay them. You shouldn't either. We're going to be right back. This is the last break of the program. We're going to put a bow on this thing, potentially. Patreon.com/Ryan Singer. It's a new year. It's a new you. It's a new me. It's a new podcast. We got 800 episodes coming up soon. I think this week. Holy smokes. And we're back. I was just thinking about it. I'm like, I'm off sugar, right? And I'm off sugar for various reasons. The number one reason is for health. I'd like to live longer. I'd like to be healthier. And, the big two vices I have, well, maybe there's three, is, caffeine in various forms, and sugar, and chicken wings. So I'm doing an elimination thing here. We're taking baby steps instead of going for it all at once. I'm dropping sugar from the roster. And that's not to say natural sugar. I'll have fruit and things like that, but I'm going to miss the milkshake game, right? And I'm not going to be a monster about it. Every once in a while, I will allow myself to have something, right? I'm not going to be totally hardcore about this, but I'm not going to have, full disclosure, leading up to the end of the year, and, maybe the entire month of November and December, and maybe even earlier than that, I always had candy around. I either had Raisinets, peanut butter M&Ms, Reese's Cups, maybe an occasional Snickers bar, maybe a Butterfinger from time to time, but not really. I worry about my teeth with those. But peanut butter M&Ms and Raisinets, those are my weakness. And those two and Reese's Cups, or, Kit Kat bars every once in a while. But mostly the cups, the peanut butter M&Ms and the Raisinets, just, ooh. And not to mention the Chunky Monkey Ben & Jerry's, which I discovered within the last year. And you just can't, a house, a pint, no problem, right? That's like a snack at best. And, you're dropping 1,000 calories or whatever, although some people tell you calories are completely made up or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist of nutrition, or a dietitian or a nutritionist, but I do know that sugar is connected, at least added sugars are connected to so many health problems. And, I need to take care of myself. I'm trying to live forever over here. That's not true. I don't need to live forever, but, I couldn't imagine, doing one-niners at 97 years old just to try to pay my rent. I'm sure I'd find joy in it. But anyway, what were we talking about? Okay, so taste buds, things, leaving the skeptic behind. And we don't need to leave the skeptic behind. It is our job to, it's not our job. I mean, that sounds, I'm not trying to make it sound like a job or like it's work, but I think that we experience such joy and wonderment in experiencing the world in a wider way that it comes naturally to us to desire sharing this whimsy and worldview with people who don't have it. And to be clear, there's a difference here in sharing and forcing a worldview. When on the other side of the coin, it could be argued that the materialist or the hardcore skeptic, they will not ask if you're interested in their worldview, oftentimes. Not all of them, but oftentimes more of the skeptic is willing to try and force their opinion on you, whether it's in the comments, on the internet, on social media, on videos on YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. There are more skeptics trying to force their opinion and worldview and their paradigm on you than there are believers and those of us who kind of live in the whimsy of it all. We're not trying to force anybody to believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, aliens, etc., even though the evidence is there, and the evidence is the shared stories and the experiences of people who have been witness to these things, even though that's not quote-unquote evidence for the modern Western world. And that's what I mean. We don't need that. And we've talked about this for a while, and Oscar alluded to this, that we don't, and by Oscar, I mean, Oscar, who we have communicated with on this show multiple times through Jessica. And, I've even had communications with Oscar myself, just privately about certain things ever since then. Now, we don't need that evidence, right? That the rest of the world needs, because experiencing is knowing. And when someone shares their experience with you, now that experience is also yours. It's a shared experience, in my opinion. And people have shared so many experiences with me. I mean, that's what we call the interviews on this show. We're coming up on the 11-year anniversary of this, or the show's been out for a full 11 years or something, and we've called them experiences. And we've had over 450 some experiences on this podcast, and I'm grateful to every single person who has shared their experience with me, and it has become part of who I am, every single one of them. And there's no real way for me to repay that other than just with gratitude, and to try to do them, try to do right by them. And I'm not here to validate their experience. They don't need me for that. Right? I mean, I have fallen victim, as we all have, to needing outside validation for all kinds of things in life. And I'm not saying it still doesn't happen to this day, because certainly it does. Well, but when we break free from needing that validation, we truly set ourselves free. That is reeling in the anchor that we talked about earlier. That is when the boat really starts. Now the open sea, it's your oyster, right? As they say. Oh, the fun you'll have. Oh, the things you'll see. Oh, the wonderments you'll discover when that anchor isn't dragging the sea floor anymore. Unencumbered joy. Some of it's scary. Some of it can be frightening. I've been there. I understand that, and I'll probably be there again. It can be even unsettling. It can be detrimental to our mental health if we aren't properly prepared for it. I'm a testament to that. But what do these things lead us into doing later in the future? And I got to tell you, I'm grateful for my experiences. I'm grateful for having the shit scared out of me in Florida in 2019. I wouldn't be where I'm at now if I hadn't had that experience. I wouldn't trade it, is what I'm saying. Even though it rattled my cage. And my cage still hasn't been unrattled all the way. I still haven't camped out solo by myself out in a state park or national park or any campgrounds. I still haven't done that. Not that I was, a solo hiker kind of person. Full tilt. I wasn't like that. But I would be able to camp out by myself. And I'd still be scared. But, it became exasperated, or it became exaggerated, rather, after that experience in 2019. Some people, I was getting texts from a comedian friend of mine right before I started recording this about why don't the people who have, who Bigfoot allegedly touches their tent somewhere, why don't they open up the tent and see what it is? I'm like, well, if you open that tent, you are braver than every person I've ever talked to or known in my life, right? That is just not something that happens. Can you imagine some large creature is touching your tent in the middle of the night in the woods, and you're like, I better go. I'm just going to unzip this thing and come face to face with whatever this is. Can you imagine? What bravery that a person would have to be able to do such a thing. There's a reason. If you've ever been in an experience like that, you understand fully well why it's almost impossible to even move a muscle in your body. It's just basic survival mechanism taking over your physiology in that moment, I'm pretty sure. In combination with the psychological terror that you're feeling and the emotional distress that that encompasses your entire being in those moments. But hey, that's just life, I guess. That's just life looking for the strange, the unusual, the unknown. That is par for the course on the quest for the supernatural. And to try to share that, right? And like I said, I'm just a person. I get aggravated, I get upset, I get angry at times about this outdated worldview of we need to show people the scientific evidence that this stuff is real. And it's I don't care about that. And no, we don't. And that's not important to me. And I'm tired of it. It's an outdated viewpoint. It's holding us back. And that's why we're not further along than we should be in our development as these multidimensional, beings of light, energy, love, and stardust. It's because we're trapped in this prison of BS. And it's all about this materialistic worldview of scientific method, et cetera, and shutting off our intuition and our knowingness and our acceptance of truth from understanding and knowing through simply experiencing or sharing. We don't need the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of it all. Talk about getting weighed down by it all. We are these beings of light that have consciously decided to anchor ourselves to a physical plane for no other reason other than to validate to ourselves what we already know to be true within ourselves. It's silly, right? It would be like a banana trying to stay inside of its peel to prove how delicious it is to other bananas, even though other bananas also are already delicious. So they never escape their peel. What's the appeal of living like that? See, they just all kind of came together, and there was a pun joke there, and it just kind of, I wasn't planning on making a pun joke there about a banana. The banana is the first thing that popped into my head. I had a banana for breakfast. It's just who I am as a person. Okay, so if you didn't like that, I don't know. There's other podcasts you can listen to that probably don't make banana appeal pun jokes nearly as often as I will. Now I will make them every 7 minutes. No, I'm just kidding. I might slip and make a banana joke every once. Okay, we got another one in. So That was a pretty short time. That was probably 30 seconds where I got another one in. Hey, aren't you glad I didn't say, okay, there we go. I never liked the orange jokes, but they are what they are. They're a part of life. So, yeah, we don't have to leave the skeptic behind. It's not our job to carry them into the land of belief, kicking and screaming. It is our joy in sharing our experiences oftentimes. And if people who, aren't believers happen to, be within earshot of that shared experience or of us telling our story, then all the better, I suppose. But we don't need it. We never have, and we never will need scientific validation for what we already know to be truth and to be real. And we move upward and we move onward. And as soon as the rest of these silly human beings that we all are, once we understand that collectively, and I think we're getting there, by the way, I do think we're getting there. Once we really all fully understand that, literally the sky is the limit for us. And we'll look back on these days and be like, wow, we were pretty silly. It was pretty foolish. You know what I mean? It's pretty foolish. It'd almost be like looking into the past when doors existed and people didn't realize they could just turn the knob and walk into a place. Instead, they just sat outside and banged on the door without realizing they already had entrance. I'll see you at a live show, I hope. If not, I'm planning things. We got this book about halfway done. Will it be published? Will it be self-published? We don't know yet. I haven't finished it, the editing, and then, there's still some process to go, and then the documentary, and then other projects, and, a new comedy special I'll be filming later this year, potentially in Indianapolis, Indiana. That'll be sometime this summer, I believe. But anyway, you can go to ryansingercomedy.com. Any tour dates will be posted there. I'm actively trying to book out 2025. I mean, we're in 2025. I hope so, because that's how I make money. So, or you'll see me at your local Target, checking you out probably, which, I hear Target's a great place to work. So, hey, no shame in that Target game. Any hoodles, if I don't see you at ryansingercomedy.com, which I won't. I don't live inside my website. That would be weird. But if I don't see you at a live show here in Los Angeles or somewhere else, I certainly hope to see you at the watering hole on the astral plane.